Sam, do you know where your nearest AI data center is?
Adam, at this point, I can't even be certain that they're not in my head.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Revolutions of Our Time, the podcast where we look at protests, revolutions, and see if we can tease out any lessons for today. My name's Adam, and with me, as always, is a man who has had an emotional roller coaster this week, from being swamped with work to seeing Arsenal win the league for the first time in more than 2 decades to going to BTS in Vegas this weekend. What a life you're leading right now, Sam. How are you doing?
It is a roller coaster indeed. To all my fellow gooners out there, which I hate the appropriation that term has turned into. Congratulations to all of you. And also, as Adam mentioned, having 2 jobs and having this podcast, which we make no money on, it is a lot to juggle. So if you're noticing at this time some episodes coming out sporadically, I very much apologize, and I will get us back on track soon enough.
Man, even though I live in Bristol, there are a couple of 13-year-olds in my class who are Arsenal supporters and who take great pride in describing themselves as gooners. And there's nothing I can do about it, but we all know what they're doing, and I'm furious.
We didn't take that term. It just happened.
Anyway, we are today going to be talking about AI, but not AI in the sense of it rotting our brains. Actually, the idea for this episode, I got the idea for this episode because you wanted to do an episode on people booing commencement speeches at universities that mention AI. Do you want to speak a little bit about that before we get into the rest of the show?
Some micro protests, as we'd probably call them. As you know, AI is being shoved down our throats at an alarming rate, and it seems like a lot of university administrators are compromised, as far as I can tell, because there were so many commencement, graduation speeches. Not necessarily from speakers. I mean, there were some speakers that got booed for this reason as well, but a lot of chancellors and heads of universities that were citing AI as a very good thing, and a lot of those received heavy boos. There was an art school, I don't remember the exact name, where you would imagine that this creative arts university would not be leaning into generative AI, but that's all their chancellor wanted to talk about. So the students were not having it and booed him off the stage, and he did not get to finish his speech. There were some other universities as well that the chancellors were very shocked by the student reaction. But I think that just goes to show how out of touch they are. And I saw this as a little form of protest from the students, and maybe the material dread that they are feeling graduating right now and going into this job market where not only is it tough for other reasons, but every job out there that is entry-level, companies are trying to automate, right?
For sure. And I think we could, and probably will at some point, spend a lot of time talking about AI as a socio-moral tool and how the use of AI or not can, in many instances, say a lot about your values and about your politics, and maybe about how we should think of AI as individuals, as consumers.
Because conservatives love AI slop. I don't know if you've noticed that. They love it.
Oh, yeah.
They think it's the coolest thing ever.
They do. Trump's always posting pictures of AI him as AI Jesus. The logo of his Board of Peace is very obviously AI generated because it's not an accurate map.
And you mentioned that I'm going to a BTS concert. Sorry to my fellow socialists. That's my one weakness is K-pop and probably commercialized sports. Those are my 2 weak points. But one thing I've noticed as well is that a lot of American puppet state adjacent, imperial court adjacent nations that are very STEM focused also seem to love AI. There's a big split in K-pop fandoms where a lot of music videos these days are just AI slop, and the Korean fans love it, and the Japanese fans have no problem with it, or Chinese fans don't really have a problem with it. But then, like, the Western fandoms really hate these new videos, so there's a big split in that community.
Interesting.
But one thing I wanted to mention as well before we dove in is I think we need to dig deeper into this, but I heard there was a landmark court case in China a few weeks ago where an employee sued for being made redundant due to AI, and the court declared that no one in China can be fired and replaced with AI, that no job can be made redundant to be replaced with AI.
Wow. That is very interesting. I hadn't
heard
about
that. It will be fought,
that.
I'm sure, by the companies there, but that is so far has been the headline. So I think we should dig deeper later this year.
Absolutely. I was getting some reels earlier about China W's, and there's a lot of them. So we can look into this a bit more. A lot to unpack there. But today we're actually focusing mostly on the United States because this is where a lot of the drama around AI data centers is playing out. And it's a very interesting lens to look at protest because of the planned data centers in 2025, a little more than 50% of projects have either been delayed significantly or quietly cancelled. In 2025, $400 billion was spent by the biggest companies in the US on AI development. That is enough for 2 Apollo programs or 9 Manhattan projects in today's money. And that $400 billion investment doesn't even include investment from Anthropic or OpenAI because they are not public companies, and so they haven't disclosed how much they've invested. And it doesn't include staffing and energy costs, literally just the construction of data centers and a few other key parts of development. And yet, about half of that has been cancelled. And we're going to talk about why. Protest is a big part of it, but we're going to talk about some of the other factors that go into it, and we're also going to talk about how those defending AI data centers are talking about that, and going to unpick some of their arguments as well a little bit.
Sounds good. I'm excited.
For this, I watched Fox Business, which was horrible, but it was a segment of Fox Business that Kevin O'Leary was on. I know, truly awful, because Kevin O'Leary is the biggest investor behind the Stratos data center, which is being proposed to be built in Utah. And it is going to be, should it get built, the largest data center in the world. It is projected to cover an area of 40,000 acres, which is larger in area than Washington, D.C.
Jesus, man.
Yeah. However, at the same time, community protests have blocked at least 48 data centers, valued at, and this figure is in contention, Fox Business valued this at $156 billion. Most articles I have seen put that figure at about $64 billion, so like 40% of that figure. Not sure where the truth in that lies. Didn't have time to dig in deep, but somewhere between 64 and $156 billion,
either
which
way,
I know is a big
numbers
distance.
We can't even conceive, right? So
exactly, huge numbers. So let's talk about some of the more economic side of why these data centers have been cancelled. And this is a little bit sort of complicated, but it's all to do with the one player that's actually making money in AI so far. So of this $400 billion investment on AI development, no AI companies have made any profit. There is one company that has made a profit in all of this. Do you know what that company is?
In AI in general, or chatbots, or what?
In, let's say, the tech space. It's a broader tech company, but it's because of AI that it's made money.
I'll go with X.
No, it's NVIDIA.
Oh, that makes sense, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Whose market cap is somewhere around 5 trillion now. So a significant portion of the global economy is just NVIDIA.
Jeez.
Yeah, 5.3 trillion is its market cap at the moment. and they make chips. So they're selling all of these chips to Amazon, to Microsoft, to Google, to Apple, to Meta, etc. And part of why some of these projects have been cancelled, it seems to be, is that NVIDIA is investing in all of these companies, and these companies are then using that money to buy chips from NVIDIA. But the bottleneck for building these data centers isn't actually the chips per se, it's about the energy supply. Because you can't do anything until the energy is in place, even though the energy infrastructure is only about 10% the cost of the build. So NVIDIA's made loads of chips, but they've not really been shipped anywhere because there's been a chip shortage, in part because of the tariffs. Trump's tariffs have made both importing chips more expensive, but also importing the raw materials to build out the energy infrastructure. Like, where do you think the components for US energy infrastructure comes from?
Like the raw, like metal and stuff?
Yeah, the components, yeah.
I would guess China and Mexico and India.
Yeah. Yeah, so China and Mexico, the other two big ones are Canada and South Korea. And, you know, all of these countries have had various tariffs slapped on them at various points.
Our relations with Canada, famously at an all-time high right now.
Yeah.
Also, Kevin O'Leary, one of Canada's infamous right-wing exports to America. There are many.
Yeah, him being Canadian is a detail which we're going to get to and is weird in this story. But
I mean, being Canadian in any big story is usually the weird part. Like when we're talking about Khalistan, like, oh, an assassination on foreign soil. And it was in Canada, of all places.
It was in Canada.
The weird part of the story.
Anyway, NVIDIA has these chips ready to go, but companies aren't going to buy them because, basically, if energy prices stay high, then it won't make sense to use chips that are older than 2 years in a year's time. And if it goes down, then it will actually be more cost effective to run more older chips. So they're holding off on ordering these chips that NVIDIA has until the energy infrastructure is in place.
Well, and I'm sure the Iran conflict isn't helping the energy prices lately, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's why the energy prices are high. And if it stays that way for a long time, then it will be cheaper. Well, they'll have to buy new chips and they can't use the ones that are currently existing, and if it goes back down, then they can buy those ones later. So that's part of why they've been delayed, because they can't build the energy infrastructure fast enough, and if the energy costs stay high, then they'll need chips that don't exist yet. So there's lots of like complicated economic things there. Other side is protests, and so for that, we're going to look at why people are upset about data centers in the first place. Kevin O'Leary went on Fox to talk about this in regards to his Stratos project. And he said, you know, we have to be considering 3 things with regards to why people are upset. You know, why are they upset? Who is giving people information that's telling them to be upset? And why are people upset over data and power usage? Now, O'Leary, and this is wild, he said that one day he woke up in April, I think, and he got a call from his social media team saying, we've got this weird influx of DMs criticizing you for this data center. And he hired some like deep tech PI guys to trace all of the IP addresses that sent him messages.
Oh, God.
And this is what he's saying on Fox News. He says that it's getting funded by the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the People's Dispatch, and the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the Peoples.
Yeah, places with extremely deep pockets, as you know.
Well, this is the point, right? Yeah, these are not rich institutions. And so he said that there is misinformation. Actually, one of the other hosts, a blonde lady whose name didn't come up, said that it was China putting out misinformation to try and make American data centers uncompetitive, and that it's not grassroots but well-funded by China and foreign billionaires. Have you heard this before, Sam?
Yeah, at this point, I think every single issue that the right has with anything, anything. It's always blame China, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this was Trump's thing about climate change back like a decade ago.
Oh, I remember that. Where he's like,
change
China needs to change their... Well, so at this point, the Republican Party has kind of shifted in like not outright denying climate change anymore because it's like in front of our faces, but their narrative now is that it's like China and India's fault because they've been polluting way more. But obviously the US is still the largest polluter per person in the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, there's a new narrative on blaming China for whatever in any topic, basically.
Yeah. So then, and this isn't like super relevant to his point, but something that Kevin O'Leary, who is a Canadian, Irish, and Emirati national, said.
Yeah, he's got that Emirati heritage.
He's got the Emirati.
He's really proud of all the traditions of his family.
He said that federal agents came to him and said if he wanted to collaborate with them in sharing these IP addresses. And he said this on Fox News. He's just like, yeah, I'm passing information to the federal agencies. Mad. Not really relevant, but a crazy thing to come out there and say.
Yeah, tech feudalism is here.
Yeah, for sure. But so one of the other Fox News hosts basically brought up and said, look, they said, I support Donald Trump and think he's doing some great things with AI. But there are people in rural communities who are concerned about these data centers being in their backyard. What would you say to that, Kevin? And Kevin says, do you hate jobs? That's the first thing he says.
I think that's his catchphrase as well.
Yeah.
On any topic.
Yeah. So he made 3 claims that were interesting. He said, people are saying it'll be 40,000 acres and that it'll be a tenth of that. That's what he said. He said they're going to bring their own power so they won't overwhelm the Utah power grid. And he said it won't drain the Great Salt Lake. He did not provide any evidence for these claims, so I looked into it. We're going to go through some of these claims in detail and sort of refute them a little bit.
Investigator Adam. By the way, this guy's petty as hell, so if we post clips of this and it only has 200 views, we still might get sued by Kevin O'Leary. So,
that'd be fun.
It would bring some publicity. Well needed publicity.
It would. We might get paid for the podcast. It's
Mark Cuban would come in and pay us out of spite.
Maybe so. So let's start with the acreage. I went on the website for Box Elder County, Utah, which is where the proposed data center is going to be built, and looked at the map that was posted on this website. They literally, as part of the consultation, posted a map with a scale that had the area of the proposed data center on it. And literally, as all maps are, it was divided into a grid, and each box was 1 square mile. And I just counted the boxes. I counted approximately 62. This is an approximation because the land designated, didn't always perfectly line up with the edges of the box. But I'm going to say that's a fairly conservative estimate, is 62 boxes. 62 square miles, convert that to acres, that is 39,680 acres. So according to the map, that is an accurate count. Now, a document from the website of Spencer Cox, governor of Utah, addresses a few points of concern in this that people have around this data center. Have you heard of Spencer Cox?
Not off the top of my head, but also let me say, I applaud you for that research you've done, because this is what we're losing out on the world with AI. And it's not that AI can't do what you did. It's just that it won't.
Yeah. I don't know that it can. It actually can't count things very easily, which is funny because it's made of maths. But yeah. But for me, counting, very easy.
Looking at maps, that's like our thing.
Yeah, I love looking at maps.
No, I don't know who he is.
He's a relatively moderate Republican,
meaning he extremely far right in every other country, but
yeah. So he didn't vote for Trump in 2016 or 2020, but did endorse him in 2024 after calling on him to resign after Jan 6. He supported overturning Roe v. Wade, but vetoed a ban on transgender youth in sports. So a relatively moderate
What
Republican.
an enigma of a man. where the lines are drawn in the sand.
Yeah. But one of the things he says in talking about the data center is that he says, yes, there are the 40,000 acres, but that not all of it is going to be for the data center. Now, he doesn't go into detail about that in this FAQ on his website, but he says he does make a point of saying that some of it will be for wildlife corridors, but I imagine that most of what isn't data center will be power station because they are planning on building their own power station.
Mm-hmm.
Still, as said, 40,000 acres is about the same size as Washington, D.C., so it's
It's insane.
big area of land.
Do you remember when you were a kid and you'd read Winnie the Pooh and like 100 acres was like...
Yeah.
That was the vastest stretch of the imagination. So...
100-acre wood. A whole world could fit in the 100-acre wood.
Exactly.
And it's bear in mind, the population of Washington, D.C. is about 680,000, I think. Something around that. So you could fit a lot of people in this
about
land.
2 million that work in that every day.
Yeah. And actually, it does also specifically mention that no residential housing will be built on this site. So it's true. Onto power. So that's on the acreage. Like, not all of that 40,000 acres will be data center, but they are developing that amount of land, and a lot of it will be. Now, when it comes to power, it's true that they intend to build their own power plants on site. Interestingly, it's gas power plants that they're planning on building, and the amount of energy that it would produce for the data center is around 9 gigawatts, which would nearly double the peak 2025 energy demand for the entire state of Utah.
I mean...
That is according to utahcleanenergy.org.
I'm sure we'll get to the why, but like in my head, I'm just like, why any of this? Like, especially as you said at the beginning, with none of the companies actually making any money yet.
Yeah. So not only would it have this increase in energy demand, it would increase Utah's, not Box Elder County, Utah's CO2 emissions by 55% and quintuple the Box Elder County's nitrous oxide emissions. Did you know the difference between sort of CO2 and nitrous oxide emissions?
No, sir. Please explain.
So CO2 is like globally damaging. That's what is one of the main greenhouse gases that's responsible for climate change. Mm-hmm. Usually when we talk about CO2 emissions, we talk about CO2 equivalent emissions. So that includes things like methane, which are also greenhouse gases. Nitrous oxide is more about local pollution. So that can cause like asthma and stuff like that. It would also require about 16.6 billion gallons of water per year, enough to fill about 25,000 Olympic swimming pools.
They need fresh water for that too, right?
They do.
Which
they do.
Famously, Utah does not have in abundance.
Indeed. And we'll come to the water in a moment. So I then found an article from another website called Grist, because I was wondering why they weren't using solar, because it would cost about the same per watt hour as solar.
Because China loves solar.
It's because China loves... That might be a part of it, but it's actually because part of the reason they picked this site in Box Elder County is that it lies on a gas pipeline. Yeah, so they wouldn't have to divert it. That seems to be why. Now, the last point, that it won't drain the Great Salt Lakes... Kevin O'Leary didn't make an argument, he made a statement, but seems to come from two areas. One is the fact that the Utah Water Board only received one application for water for the site. The application was then revoked, but the people who made it are planning on resubmitting it, apparently. And this would basically divert the irrigation water from a ranch. So the argument is that there's not more water being drained per se, it's just being diverted from other places. And the other part of that argument is also from Senator Cox's FAQ, which argues that it's a closed-loop system which doesn't continuously draw water, just needing, quote-unquote, the occasional top-up. It's not clear from how we wrote it whether that includes the power plant. I suspect not, because power plant is just evaporating water.
Yeah.
This is what they don't tell you about, like, fossil fuel or indeed nuclear power plants. It is just heating up water. That's all it is.
We're still in the steampunk age. It's just got a different coating.
So the other thing is, yes, maybe it's a closed loop system. Let's say that it is. That's not why it might drain the Great Lake. The reason it might drain the Great Lake is the heat output that is being put into Hansel Valley. That's the sort of area north of the Great Lake where this where the data center is going to be built. Now, the heat output is equivalent to 23 atomic bombs of thermal energy every day.
Jesus.
Yeah. This could increase the daytime temperature of the area by 5 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 2 degrees Celsius, and the nighttime temperature by 28 degrees Fahrenheit, about 15.5 degrees Celsius.
Jeez.
This is the difference between Utah's semi-arid climate and the climate of the Sahara Desert. So the thinking is that what some physicists have said is that basically this could change the watershed, and the watershed is how water actually drains into a basin. So water would not drain into the Great Salt Lake, meaning it couldn't be replenished as it normally would. This is a lake that's already been depleted in terms of its sort of levels, and there are some efforts to refill it, but it's been a tough time for the Great Salt Lake recently. I will say on that note that, are you familiar with the Aral Sea, Sam?
Yes, I am. Was the Soviet Union, I believe, is around Kazakhstan now, right?
Kazakhstan. I think you can also get there from Uzbekistan, but Kazakhstan's the main area. So this was a huge inland sea that was one of the greatest environmental disasters of the 20th century, as the Soviets basically destroyed it, trying to irrigate cotton, which can't really grow in that area. But it's regained a third of its water thanks to careful regeneration projects from Kazakhstan.
I didn't know that. That's good to hear. I do remember seeing videos and pictures of like boats sitting just on land 30 miles away from where the water was, and they're like, yeah, this was the dock back in the day.
Yeah, so it seems to be that like the South Aral Sea, which is what's in Uzbekistan, is gone, and it's like pretty toxic, salty desert there now. But the North Aral Sea, which is in Kazakhstan, is replenishing thanks to this dam that's being built. And the fear is that this sort of toxic, salty desert is what could be left in Utah.
Well, and on the southern part of the lake is basically where all of Utah's residents live, right? In Salt Lake City and the valley, which just basically has most of its cities like Ogden and Provo and all that. Yeah,
so it's a pretty important piece of infrastructure for the people of Utah. So that's Kevin O'Leary's argument as to why people shouldn't be worried about data centers, and 3 statements that he made and why they're not quite as he has described them. But you raised the point, right? Why do these people want data centers? Why do you think?
I think part of it's speculation, right? Like a lot of people see AI as a bubble that is going to burst very hard, and people are going to lose a lot of money. And I tend to agree with that. But just as like, you kept hearing about VR like 10 years ago, right? Like that was like Meta was investing so much money in their VR and the metaverse, and that was the next big thing, right? Every company is going to be on the metaverse, and it was generally just seen as something they could pitch their investors. That was what the whole thing was, and that's what most of these VR projects was just to pitch their stock and make the stock price go up. And it seems like that's what's happening with a lot of AI now, is just, hey, add a little chatbot to our system and stock price goes up, right? And so data centers store that information, but also I think even if you don't need this massive, massive data center at this time, like the construction of it projects optimism into the market, I would say. So it's kind of to keep the illusion of like AI as this great economic driver.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, that I think tech companies are having to deal with the fact that a lot of the sort of tech innovation, which has speared economic growth, particularly in the West over the past 30 years or so, has plateaued. Like increases in computing power aren't translating to sort of better tech experiences for most people anymore. Like if you had a phone in 2010 and got a new one in 2013, light years of difference between what they could do. But like if you buy a smartphone from 2020 versus one from 2026, I don't know, maybe the screen's a little bit better, maybe the battery life's a little bit better, but it's not a huge difference.
Right. And a lot of the tech experiences are just worse overall now, right?
Oh, yeah.
We've noticed you're using an ad blocker. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And
yeah, Google's been getting worse for years.
yeah. And I think this is just like an endemic problem with capitalism, as we know, which we've talked about a few times, where the goal of most companies, not just tech companies, but I think tech works so much faster and there's so much more money in it that it's more apparent. But the goal is not to make something that improves the lives of the many, and the goal is not even to make like a sustaining product that you can be proud of and make a lot of money off of. It's to get big enough to where your stock is high enough to where you can sell and get the hell out of there. That's the goal of like 99% of companies. It's just to be absorbed into the monopoly and make money doing that, right? It's all speculation.
Absolutely true. Now, it's worth noting that Kevin O'Leary also mentioned how he wanted US to be able to stand up to China and how this was vital for being able to stand up to China. Noted Canadian Kevin O'Leary, who famously surrendered his American citizenship some years ago in order to focus on Canadian politics.
And probably not pay tax.
And not pay tax. Yeah, he would have to pay a lot of tax because of American global taxation laws.
Yeah, they're the worst. As someone that's lived abroad and is American.
The other thing is, I think that Kevin O'Leary, part of his business is in terms of being a brand. I really a guy who is on podcasts. That seems to be a big part of Kevin O'Leary's business.
Yeah. I mean, before that, it was TV.
Yeah. I think he knows what his target audience wants to hear, that it's about supremacy over China.
For some reason, right? Like, who cares?
For some reason. So we've spoken about the economic problems of data centers. We've spoken about the sort of physical, environmental problems of data centers. Now let's talk a little bit about the role of protest in disrupting these data centers for the last bit of the podcast. So there is a website called Data Center Watch, which is
we love a watch site, don't we?
We love a watch site. It's keeping record of all of the different protest groups that are campaigning against new data center developments. And they have identified at least 142 activist groups operating across 24 states campaigning against new developments. News outlet Common Dreams has focused on the data center protest group No Data Center Monterey Park. Have you been to Monterey Park? It's near Los Angeles.
Maybe. I mean, Los Angeles is just an amalgamation of 100 different neighborhoods that call themselves cities. So I've probably been in traffic in Monterey Park, I'm sure.
Sure. It does describe itself as a city 11 kilometers east of Los Angeles, so I think that makes it just
I don't think they used the word kilometers, but I think you did.
Well, let's be real. Wikipedia did, but it's...
Your European Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is a European psyop. I don't actually know where Jimmy Wales is from. Anyway, No Data Center Monterey Park successfully lobbied the city council to pass 3 ordinances banning data center construction in the city, and the city actually declared them a public nuisance. It has been very successful, and data center protest groups have been very successful. And part of why they are successful is because of their bipartisan appeal. Can you imagine why that might be, Sam, that both Democrats and Republicans seem to not really like data centers?
Because I think the material negatives that appear in people's lives from data centers are very easily communicated, and it's really hard to explain why they would be positive to your day-to-day life.
Yeah, this is exactly where the sort of, I was going to say research. I mean, this article was written by a postdoc at CSU Los Angeles, but I think it's punditry at this point. Mm-hmm. But the punditry suggests that, yes, the immediacy and materiality of the impact that these are going to have on people's lives. It's very easy to get people on board and say, this is going to increase your utility bills. It's going to use a lot of water in an area that doesn't have a lot of water. It's going to pollute the air. You can maybe even see it, taste it in the air. And this impacts are non-discriminatory, right? They're going to impact everyone in an area, Democrat or Republican. And people also, by and large, we talk about how conservatives love AI slop, but what people don't like is how AI is being forced into their lives. People don't like how your phone has to have an AI option. Your computer has to have an AI option. You have to use it at work. You have to do this. People don't like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very local target with very noteworthy material considerations.
And other than the initial construction, there's like no jobs associated with it at all, right?
Yeah, quite the opposite. They are seen as ways of taking jobs away, right? Like the meme of it that goes around is, oh, AI is going to solve $1 trillion problem. The $1 trillion problem is your wages.
Exactly.
In Monterey Park, the No Data Center Monterey Park was sort of powered, a sort of a separate protest group, but it was powered by San Gabriel Valley Progressive Action, which is a mutual aid group that has a lot of experience in organizing. So they deliver supplies in sort of a mutual aid style to those who are affected by wildfires and by ice. They do policy, education, community care things. They do traditional demonstrations. And it seems like for this specifically, because it's a relatively small municipality, a lot of it's letter writing, a lot of it's petitions, flyers, yard signs. They do tactical demonstrations. Attending public hearings is a huge thing. And they just really go out there and make their voice heard. But because it is at such a local level, it's very effective. You can put pressure on a local politician a lot more easily. And certainly in the United States, municipalities have a lot of power over zoning laws and what can be built in an area.
It might also be worth noting, you mentioned San Gabriel Valley. So now I know exactly which bit of LA this is in.
Okay.
It's like east towards Riverside. So it's like working class commuter communities. And that area in particular is really diverse. That valley in general, like not just that city, but there's a few different cities within that valley that have like huge Chinese population, obviously Hispanic, but all sorts of different people that live in that community. And it's not overtly wealthy compared to like West LA or something, or up in the hills.
It's interesting you point out those communities because on the website for well, I can't remember if it's the Progressive Action or the No Data Center group, but they're like, you can get flyers in English, Mandarin, Cantonese, or Spanish. I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
There's a huge Hong Kong diaspora in that valley, like Walnut, those cities. They have like night markets in the summer that I want to go to.
Oh, cool.
But it's far from me.
That's sick.
Like 2 hours.
Yeah, fair. So Nicholas Rabb, who wrote this article for Common Dreams, made the argument that, the climate movement has maybe struggled because it's been too focused on national projects. Palestine has been focused internationally, and this is a little bit removed from people's day-to-day experience, and that might be why it's hard to get people on board. In fact, I would like you, please, to read this paragraph from the article, which sums it up nicely.
Acknowledging the reality of national and international issues or systematic issues, but then being able to pinpoint their relief manifestations and effects in your own life and the life of your community should be the organizing paradigm we work within. Systems cannot function unless their local units act to fuel the system. Oil and gas relies on countless local offices, workplaces, university programs, and even gas stations or pipeline projects. Workers and infrastructure fuel the machine. The same is true for big tech and the military-industrial complex, big agriculture, and more.
There you go. This is sort of the real... How do you put this?
To go back to a quote, our mutual acquaintance, Matthias Schmale, think global, act local, right?
Yeah, exactly. Think global, act local. Not only as a sort of twee rallying cry, but it is effective in terms of getting stuff done. I will say, before we wrap up, which we will do shortly, that not all of the protests have been peaceful. In Indianapolis, more than a dozen bullets were fired at the house of City Council member Ron Gibson, a Democrat who had backed rezoning for a data center. This was proposed by the developer Metroblocks, and on his doorstep, a handwritten note reading, "No data centers" was found.
But he changed his vote.
Yeah.
It worked. I'm starting to think the people that said violence doesn't solve anything are maybe the people in charge.
Yeah, we should do an episode on violence at some point. There was a great Philosophy Tube video about violence as a protest tactic, because we're not endorsing anything. I want to make this explicitly clear, but it does work.
We're an education channel.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a review of Andreas Malm's book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline.
I would love
which
that.
is an analysis of the strategic pacifism of the climate movement and why Malm thinks that perhaps that was a bad move. I will say that across the US, there have been various data centers that have been defeated by petitions, political campaigns that are focused on this issue, demonstrations, and of course lawsuits. Very litigious society, and a lawsuit will often get things stopped in their tracks.
Well, as you said, this is a bipartisan issue, and I've seen protests from in big cities as well as in really rural areas, like West Virginia, Kentucky type. I've seen older people like in their 70s and 80s being interviewed, being like, we never thought we'd ever have to go out and fight against something like this here. But yeah, it's across the whole spectrum of life in America. There's been protest.
It's pretty unique to see something that is so bipartisan, that does have such a wide appeal as an issue, and it's something that people are organizing around. I saw another part of that article which basically argued that data centers are an effective target for organizing for the same reason unions are, because it's built on this material thing that is local. Everyone knows that it's there, and can focus their attentions there. And I also saw, and this was just something I came across while I was scrolling the other day. So unfortunately, I did not get to jot it down. But it was an interview with a CU guy who had been involved in protests against the Keystone XL pipeline. And he was talking about how they got Republican landowners on board by initially saying, look, one spill and it'll poison all your cattle. And they were like, oh, no one's going to take my land like they took your land. And they managed to get them on board this way and actually slip in some pro-indigenous legislation to the measures that they were putting there. So it can be a springboard for much wider change as well.
Yeah. It is a quite, it has the underpinnings of some class consciousness amongst people, like this target. But at the same time, I don't know how you can message to certain people that you can't have Grok generating whatever image you want every 4 minutes, and not have these, they're one and the same. So I don't know how that part is reconciled with the half of the population that is so obsessed with AI.
Yeah, well, that maybe remains to be seen, and maybe we can do an episode about the use of AI. I think we'll wrap it up there. Unless, do you have any further thoughts, Sam, before we conclude?
I just want to say I appreciate your investigation into that. I think maybe I've just been so let down by journalism these days, but I think I'd appreciate some more episodes like this, and maybe so would our listeners, where Adam takes a closer look at stuff. He's wearing a tie today, so he's got the look for it too.
I am wearing a tie. I work in a school. Sometimes I have to wear a tie.
A British school.
A British school. That's true. Yeah, I mean, I'm down. The thing about this investigation was it took like a couple of hours to investigate 3 sentences. So, I mean, investigative journalists, hats off to you.
That just goes to show, it's the age-old quote where it says it takes, 1 minute to tell a lie, and it takes a lifetime to dispute it, right?
Yeah, what's the version of that I like is a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on.
I like that. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
But all that to say, I appreciate the work you've done in a short turnaround for this episode.
Thanks, man.
And I apologize to the listeners again for the delay. So we'll get back on track soon. And by the next time we meet, and I'm sure it'll be weeks after this episode will come out weeks after Arsenal have played in the Champions League final. And while they are owned by Walmart money, I would argue that's not as bad as Qatari money, and Qatari in the sense that Qatar owns the club, not a guy from Qatar owns the club. So
Who are they playing?
PSG.
Of course. Ugh. Anyway.
Paris Saint-Germain. So
Grim.
it'll already be over by then, but, I'm proud of the boys this season regardless. And Arsenal also has a place in my heart. It has many reasons for being there, not least because North London and Arsenal territory is where I met some of my closest friends, including Adam.
It's true. Off Holloway Road.
Holloway Road, up to Tufnell, all that.
Up to Tufnell Park. Oh, what a grim halls of residence I lived in.
But what great streets.
Great streets. Well, Sam, thank you for the fond memories. Best of luck to the Arsenal. Thank you, dear listener, for listening. As always, look out for each other, stay safe, and keep fighting the good fight. To conclude, I thought we would share a quote which sums up my feelings about AI art through just talking about art itself. Sam, if you could please read this quote from legendary Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh.
If you hear a voice within you say, "You cannot paint," then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced.